Hello and welcome, Pathfinders, to the Find the Path Adventures Twitch stream for our IsolaCon event. IsolaCon? I think IsolaCon. That is my bad. It's just the charity event that we are backing here. I am Rick Sandidge. I am the host and game master for the Find the Path podcast, an actual play podcast and official partners with Paizo Publishing and their whole Pathfinder line. I am joined by my co-hosts and usual players, sometimes victims, Jordan Jenkins, Ross Scoggin, Rachel Sandidge, Jessica Peters / eventual Jenkins, and Heather Allen. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So,
good morning.
Welcome to our panel. We are running this for IsolaCon, which is a volunteer-run charity event for the RPG Creators Relief Fund, or the RCRF. Say that 10 times fast.
RCRF.
Yeah, well, actually, thank you, Jordan. Or thank you, Ross, actually.
That was Ross. I didn't do it.
I don't know your names. So COVID-19, of course, has impacted most of our lives in generally terrible ways. And unlike other employees who may have been furloughed, or the contract and gig workers, such as game creators, freelancers, cartographers, artists, layout, editors, developers, just to name a small number of the people responsible for bringing us amazing content every month, are ineligible for state and federal run employee unemployment benefits. So the RCRF is trying to fill that gap. 100% of all the money donated goes directly to RCRF, and we are not getting any money from this whatsoever, as this is a charity. So please make any donations to rcrfcharity.org or on their Drive-Thru RPG page, and any amount helps keep our game creators and ultimately our gaming community together. So thank you. You can find that up at the top, as Jessica was just pointing out.
Yeah.
Yep. So I suppose then let's go ahead and get started with the panel that we have planned here today. We are going to be talking about tips and tricks for doing actual play games, as well as how you can kind of incorporate those into your regular home games. So we'll just kind of go through. We're going to have a Q&A segment at the bottom, just to announce this at the top for our new fans out there who are also tuning into this. First off, thank you. We definitely appreciate you guys showing up and, of course, supporting any sort of charity. And secondly, there may be some spoilers depending on the questions asked in the chat. So just so you're aware, there might be spoilers for later on in either our Mummy's Mask or Tyrant's Grasp actual plays. So just so you know. So I suppose to start things off, what is an actual play? No, I'm not actually going to do that.
Jason Goldman.
Taking it way back.
I'm going to assume if you came to this, you probably know what an actual play is. It is, of course, when you're actually playing for recording. That's how I explained it anyway. Actually, no. For the very first thing we're going to go ahead and talk about is we get a lot of questions pertaining towards actual plays and whether or not people want to start an actual play and whether or not starting an actual play is right for them. So there are a lot of things that go into making an actual play podcast, and actual plays aren't necessarily right for every group. So for instance, if you're one of those people that you have to pull teeth to get your group to get together every week or every 2 weeks, or there's that one person that always cancels at the last minute, it might not be a good thing to dedicate yourself to a program or a project that is going to take you pretty much the next 5 years of your life. Especially if you want to coordinate and meet on a weekly basis. Most actual play podcasts are released on a weekly basis. Ours is, with the exception of our Tyrant's Grasp actual play, which is released bi-weekly. And as such, you need to meet pretty much either every week or every 2 weeks and record for 2 episodes to be able to keep up with that. So if you're looking at launching an actual play, you definitely want to know that you're going to have people there for every part of it. The second thing is, and this is a common question I get, what exactly is the cost of doing an actual play? And that is a complex answer. In essence, because you can do it with a shoestring budget, which to be perfectly honest is actually how we started.
Yep.
We started with about $800 worth of gear, which for an actual play is pretty low.
Yeah.
And a lot of that you can kind of fix. Well, I always hate to use the term fix it in post, but you can kind of fix it in post to some small degree. So when you're starting out, when you're coming into the initial entry cost, expect it to be about $1,000, just so that you know off the bat that you're going to need to get microphones for every individual. You can do an omnidirectional microphone. I would not suggest that because every person's voice is different. And so everyone needs to be on their own individual microphone so that you can balance the levels for each individual person. Secondly, you would need some sort of audio interface, which in our case, we use a mixer. We're kind of analog. We don't do the digital audio interfaces. We actually run everything into a mixer like you would see at a concert, usually used for instruments and things like that, and then bounce levels from there into a single line output. So at that moment, you're looking at, say for all of us, it'd be 6 microphones and 1 mixer that can handle 6 channels. Pro tip, by the way, if you look up a 6-channel mixer, it will only have 3 inputs because it also has separate inputs for line inputs. That's a lot of technical things to say that if you're wanting microphone mixer, you want to have double the number of microphones that you need. So a 12-channel input for a mixer. The next step that you'd need is a recording software. So that's actually usually, you can go with Audacity. It's perfectly free. And honestly, Audacity gets a lot of flack, but it's actually pretty good. So that works pretty well for you. Yeah, and once you have microphones, you've connected all those to a mixer and you plug those into a digital audio interface such as Audacity, you're kind of good to go. While there is an initial cost to it, there are enough videos that I was self-taught in this, and I think we do pretty good, being, that we have a successful Patreon and a Paizo backing. So I would encourage anyone that is interested in doing it and has a group that is interested. It is very important that I stressed with everyone when I sat down and said that, hey guys, just so you know, I really want to do this project. Are all of you cool for doing this for the next 5 years of your life?
Yep.
I mean, we played every weekend beforehand already. Might as well record.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now it's also work.
Yes. And I mean, Rick, how much time do you spend editing? Because that's the other piece.
That is a part of it. As a rule of thumb, you usually want to spend about 2 hours editing for every hour that you record. So if you're recording an episode and it's going to be about 2 hours, you'll probably want to spend about 4 hours editing, especially if you mix the background music. We use Sirenscape. Sirenscape is phenomenal. Ben Looms, you're a great person.
Yes.
He's also
And a cool
perfectly
person.
fine with anyone using it. So that's what's also great about Sirenscape. When you're mixing that in, it usually brings it up to about 2 hours per hour of it. So for whoever is going to be your editor, or if you're taking turns, understand that that person not only is going to be running a game and playing in a game, but also will need to spend additional hours editing through and creating the material. The last thing I did want to mention is there is a certain personality that needs to go into doing actual plays. And it's not necessarily that, you need personality and chemistry. It helps. I think we all have, at the very least, unique personalities. I'll use that. That almost sounds like backhanded compliment, but
Wow,
it's
thank you.
Unique.
it's intended as a positive compliment.
Oh,
You
man.
will get feedback. You will sometimes get negative feedback.
Yeah.
I've been told that my voice can be quite grating to certain people. I understand that. I'm glad that it's not the majority of people. So, but you just have to accept that you will get negative content. You will sometimes get people that will just troll you. And unfortunately, when you put yourself out there, that's going to happen. However, I will say that a vast majority of the audio listening community are phenomenal people and are incredibly supportive.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, once you've decided basically if you can do it and have the equipment to do it, you then need to decide what you're doing. And for that, I'm going to kick it over to Jessica to talk a little bit about, basically deciding what you're going to do.
Yeah, so this is kind of the second biggest decision to make after deciding to do it in the first place. You really have to make sure that you're going to pick the right story for your group, whether it's going to be a homebrew story or you're going to play through published material like we do. You need to think about kind of your group's strengths. What do they like? What are they going to be able to build really great characters for? And what kind of story is going to fit the way that you play? We like to play roleplay heavy, interesting location type stories, and so we're playing Mummy's Mask and we're playing Tyrant's Grasp. But if you're more into pirates, there's an adventure path for that. Or if you're more into, I don't know, the cold, wintry north, there's adventure paths for that. Or you can homebrew. And if you're going to run something published by Paizo, you can check out What Do You Do Pods on Twitter. They have a running list of what everyone is playing for both streams and for podcasts. So you can check out Pathfinder 1E, 2nd and Starfinder, as well as I think they even list homebrew games that are using that rule set.
They do. Jason goes above and beyond on that. So thank you, Jason.
Yeah, it's real great. So you can look in there because you want to make sure that when you're, now this is going to get businessy, when you're positioning yourself in the actual play market, you want to make sure that you are picking something that hasn't been done to death. If you look on there and somebody, like 6 other groups are running the same adventure path that you're thinking of starting, maybe don't. Maybe look for something that's either there's less people doing it or no one's doing it yet, and kind of kick off from there, because it gives you a little bit of breathing room and space to not be perfect at the beginning. Because if you're going to compete against someone who's well established, has a big fan base, most people don't want to listen to the same story twice. And your audio quality is not going to be as good starting out as the more established groups, because everybody has to start somewhere and you have to grow and learn. And so give yourself some space to do that by picking something that's less done. You also probably want to listen to some actual plays. So, you know, find some groups that seem to be doing pretty well, that have a lot of listeners, that are doing great.
Market research.
Do that market research. Listen to what they're doing. Learn from their mistakes. It'll save you a lot of heartache, especially in the way that they handle their fans and the way that they handle, if they have a Patreon, their Patreon, that sort of thing. Because again, you're going to be doing this for a long time, and anything you can learn from others before you kind of jump in is going to really help you. And then lastly, in general, just kind of think about who you are. So if you are going to set out to be a comedy podcast that plays a game, that's very different than a group of players playing a game who happen to be funny. So think about what kind of brand you want to have, what your vibe's going to be, and try to stay pretty consistent so that people know what to expect from you. Because that helps you build an audience, that helps people, you know, feel safe when they recommend you to their friends. So for example, we try to be pretty family friendly. Obviously there's violence because we're playing Pathfinder, but there's no cursing, there's no super lewd content in what we do. There's no, you know, risque stuff. And so, you know, if somebody's going to recommend us to their friend, they don't have to worry about that. They know exactly what they're getting, no matter what they're recommending for us. So being consistent in who you are and the themes and kind of the way that you do things is really, really helpful. I think that's pretty much all I have as far as that sort of thing. Let's go ahead and see, Rachel, talk a little bit about like making characters, because that's an important step, right? Once you pick the game.
You know, it's kind of important, you know. I don't know. You could just do whatever, but characters tend to be pretty crucial to the plot. I mean, first off, just starting out, kind of building off of what Jess said, you need to have a specific style in mind, like if you're going to have a comedic character versus a serious character or a playful character, and you want to be fairly, you know, consistent with that. You know, I know it's kind of difficult because when you first start out with a character, you don't really know what that character is going to do. But since you're going to be having this audience and you're in this actual play, you kind of want to hash that out a little bit ahead of time. I am that dork that practices in front of a mirror for a little bit, but you know, whatever works for you.
You know, while driving, I practice.
I do actually while I'm driving a lot.
Do not practice in front of a mirror while also driving.
Oh yes, no. One or the other. One or the other.
Combine the two.
Don't practice in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. I would say From there, I would say play to your region, depending on what story you pick. So, for example, we chose Mummy's Mask. So all of our characters, save one, are actually from Osirian. And that kind of helps create a cohesive story. It kind of helps tie everybody into the area. I mean, it's not a definite thing that you have to do that. If you have a hook in your backstory that's going to tie you into the story somehow, that's okay to be from somewhere else. But it does kind of help that, hey, if you're going to be in this region, probably stick to that region. Because if they get too far removed, it becomes harder to engage them in the story the way that a GM might like, or even how you would like. You might get left out a little bit, and that's not cool. No. And speaking of story hooks, definitely have some story hooks in your background for the GM to use, because it is one of the best things to be playing through the story, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, I mentioned that in my backstory, and now we're doing something in the story. And so that's always really cool, and it helps flesh out your character and really build what you have going there, because I mean, otherwise you're not gonna, the people listening aren't gonna know what you put in your backstory unless you leave those hooks for the GM to use. But be aware that the GM might tweak them a little bit to fit.
Also talk to the GM.
Yes, talk to the GM.
Talk to the GM for sure, because it is so much fun when you get like that backstory pull. I mean, we all get excited, and we've been playing this for how long? Beyond that, is when you are creating a character, I think it's really important to keep in mind that while you want to be good at everything, you don't need to be good at everything. Stick to your lane a little bit. Like if you're going to be the fighter character, your fighter character doesn't need to be the arcane expert, unless that's something lacking in your group. But otherwise, let everybody kind of have their expertise. Let them have their moment to shine, because that makes it a lot. It makes it a lot better to get everybody into the story.
Stay in your lane, basically.
Stay in your lane, But I mean, don't be afraid to try new things. Like I had a character where, he was a fighter, but had a skill that wasn't normal for fighters. That's okay, but you need to make sure that that's something that you're filling within the group. It's not just this random thing you wanted to have that's kind of stepping on somebody else's toes.
Compliment, don't compete.
Exactly.
Yes.
Very good way to put that. I would say that when you are in an actual play, while a character voice is not necessary if you're just playing with a group of friends around the table, it is a little bit more necessary when you are playing to an audience. Pretty much because some of us do sound similar. So you want to make sure that you are distinctive and that everyone knows, hey, this is the character that is talking in this moment. That is really important. It doesn't necessarily need to be an accent. Not everybody is good at accents. I'm okay, but I watched a lot of television growing up and mimicked things. I think we've already established this. But you can try, just doing a different cadence with your with how you're saying your words, or how Heather does, where she just changes her pitch. I mean,
Yep.
And that's might just be the one thing that you can do, and that's fine. But as long as you have something different going on, I think that's really going to help. Beyond that, I would say just be flexible. The story may not always go in the direction that you wanted it to go, but it might be going that direction and turn into something way cooler than you originally had. So be flexible with your character. Don't be afraid to kind of let the GM play with it a little bit, interact with the other characters, develop that character with your fellow PCs, stuff like that.
Yes, those are all great tips, both on and off mic too. So
yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of on and off mic, I'm actually going to pass this over to Ross and let him kind of expand on that a little bit.
Wait, there's nobody named Mike here.
Oh man, we forgot Mike.
Mike.
Jeez. All right, I guess you'll have to settle for me then.
There you go.
You got this, Ross.
Upgrade, if you will.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I guess let's go ahead and get this started. So I'm going to be talking a lot about mic awareness, and this is certainly part of an actual play that isn't really present when you're playing around with your friends. So mic awareness mostly, I mean, yes, obviously you all know you're on a mic when you're doing an actual play podcast.
Nope.
I mean, it's kind of unavoidable. It's this thing right in front of you that, you know, it's like very present. However, there are still right and wrong ways to use it. You have to be very aware of basically what's going on around you. You have to be consciously trying to keep directed at the mic. If you start saying something and then you move around and you kind of, you know, turn away from the microphone for a little bit, either your characters started to mumble to themselves or people know that you just started turning away from the microphone. It's very obvious. Or, you know, for example, if you're going to do something really loud, you don't want to bust out other people's eardrums. So you might want to go a little past the mic or back up for a little bit. So it sounds louder, but it doesn't actually make anybody curse your name when they go to get, you know, restorative surgery in their ear.
Mostly
we
Rick.
screamed into the mic in the beginning, and that was not fun.
Yeah, no, nobody wants to hear that. So, you know, these are things you need to keep in mind. Moreover, though, than just being aware of the microphone, you also need to be aware that this is purely audio. And this means that you need to be very descriptive with your character's actions and what you're doing. And for the GM, you need to be very descriptive with all of the NPCs' actions, all the monsters' actions. Because you have to remember that, you know, for example, in combat, nobody else can see the board that you're looking at. So if you say something like, oh, well, I moved there and then I attacked, nobody knows what that means. So you might say something more like, I stride forward 20 feet to move into the flank. I nod at Ailsa and then make my attack with my sword. That's much more descriptive, and that makes, you know, people... That gives people a way to go into the action without necessarily having to see the board that you're looking at. So, yeah, definitely, you know, things like, oh, I move there, I look there, I attack, you know...
I attack this guy.
Yeah, I attack this guy, especially.
What are
This
you
one,
doing?
This one over here.
Come on, don't you see him? No, it's like I attack the kobold in the corner, or, you know, I charge the gibbering mouther, or whatever it is you're fighting. So the you know, the main thing there too, especially for GMs, is that you need to learn to describe things without necessarily relying upon props. Which is, of course, for me, unfortunate. When I GM, I really love to use props. I use a lot of things like, here's a picture, or here's, you know, a notebook or something. But you once again have to remember, people aren't necessarily going to see those things. Yeah. So if you pass a note to a player, you know, you'll want to have either you or the player or somebody read that out loud, because otherwise it's like, oh, I found this. Okay, it says important stuff, you know, and then everyone's like, I don't know what it said.
It's my secret. I'll hold it forever.
I will not share in this cooperative role-playing game.
Or like, sorry. Or, you know, it's like you find a sword and you don't want to just say, okay, you find a nice sword. You know, it's like, that's cool. Like, that's not a bad description, but they can't see the picture of the sword that's in the book. So you might say, like, you find this sword that, you know, has gold filigree lettering on the blade, and it's carved out in these elvish, you know, characters, and basically just dress it up some, so that way everyone can join in on the fun of the description of whatever it is that you're talking about. And again, this also applies doubly for like dungeon areas or anything like that. Actually describe the stonework. It describe the, you know, the sounds, the smells, all that stuff, because that all helps for a more immersive experience. And oh, sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you, Ross.
Oh, wow. I didn't expect anybody to do that. All right. Well, with that, I believe Jordan has some more information for us. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'm going to go through some tips we learned from playing a podcast that actually go well with going an off-mic game. And because we got a lot of feedback and a lot of things that we learned by doing the podcast that actually do translate to our offline games. One of the big things that we started doing is we took a lot of the same effort that we put into the podcast into our offline games. So we already started with something that was very similar to kind of how we were already playing when we started, the Mummy's Mask podcast. But what we really did was we, kind of turned it up to 11, and we really pushed ourselves forward. And what it took was, going deeper into our character backstories, adding in the accents and the vocal changes. And, for a GM, there's a lot of work that you have to do on top of that. So Rick, for instance, does a very good job at having every NPC feel unique and distinctive. So we're still making references to these characters. I mean, 30 episodes later, 2 years down the line. And what that really took is, some additional prep work and really kind of pushing yourself to do better at what you're doing. So part of that is we got feedback. So we got better at what we were doing because we actually got feedback from an audience. And when you're doing an offline game, you don't really have that audience that can really, sit there and say, hey, I liked this, I didn't like this. And so what I would recommend from a GM perspective is actually getting feedback from your players, because they are your audience, more or less. And not just like, hey, did you enjoy this? Did you guys have a fun time? But what can I do better? It's one of the things that we learned was that you can't ever settle in terms of, your craft and getting better at it. And the best way you can do that is to actually get some feedback from somebody. So going in and asking the players, and maybe it's one-to-one if they're not somebody who likes speaking up in a group, hey, I know you're having fun, but is there anything I could do to make this better for you? And you might be aware of some of the things that you can do better, and you're trying to fix them, but you might be surprised at some of the stuff that people come back to you and say, hey, I like your descriptions, but I wish that you talked more about, the smell. Like, for me, that would make this, crank this up to the next level. And that's the kind of feedback that you may not be aware of. So that's definitely one way to do it. And it does keep this kind of open communication between, you as the game master and the players, to where you can have more honest dialogue. So I think it's better for your relationship. It's going to be better for, the game as a whole. And that's, I think, the biggest thing that we can kind of take away from this is that none of us are perfect. I mean, we've been doing this for 2 years on mic. We've been doing it for a million years off mic. We're still improving. We're still getting better. And if you have that same attitude of we can do better, and don't think, don't neg yourself and say, oh, I'm never going to be good at this. You're starting where you're starting, and just practice and get better. And so we took a lot of the things that we were hearing on our feedback, we put it in our offline games, practiced it, and then we were able to bring it back into the the on mic game.
Well, and none of us are professional voice actors or actors or anything.
No.
So everything that
Really, really not.
yeah.
We're
So
barely
We
professional
try.
anything.
we're professional other stuff.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
True.
But I mean, the way that we've gotten better is just by doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that kind of falls back also into the accepting constructive criticism is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah. In life and in Pathfinder.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna pass it over to Heather, because she has opinions on the player side of tips.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to talk about some player tips. Rachel and Jordan kind of touched on this earlier about the accents. I'm not great with accents, which is actually part of the reason my first character was a male character, because I'm like, I can just change my pitch. And then for Tyrant's Grasp, I got a little bit braver, and I'm sorry about that, guys. I hope.
Whatever. You're
You do
fine.
fine.
Your accent's good. It's my horrible accent, so you're fine.
If we have any Eastern European listeners, please comment.
Yeah. Or don't, because
Or don't.
I'm sorry. And then
We do our best.
Mika, it was one of those, I'm just going to try to talk faster and raise my pitch. You don't always have to do an accent, but you really should, even on your off-air games, not just for for podcasting, try to do something that's a little bit different. So everybody always knows when your character's talking versus when you're making snarky, side comments yourself, which is something we never ever do at my
Not even once.
Do I sense sarcasm?
No, I just said
Me,
we
this
don't
baby's
do
off
that.
the charts.
And another thing to we talked about how Rick puts a lot of time and effort into the NPCs. It's okay to care about the NPCs and want to take some time to hang out with these characters and get to know them, even if maybe it's not exactly advancing the main plot of the story. That's how we got Falto and a few of the other NPCs in Mummy's Mask, that now it would be weird if they weren't with us. So, don't be afraid to go hang out with a character you think is a little bit interesting.
Yeah.
So, and then what else do I have to talk about? Things and stuff and player tips. I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. I don't usually do this in front of people live.
You're doing great.
Yeah.
And it does raise the thing that, as far as being a player is concerned, it's strange to have an audience.
Yes,
and,
it
you
is
need to
kind of
adjust to...
strange.
Yeah.
That was one of the things, the feedback and everything is, was really important to us. And it, and it always takes a little while for you to get into the swing of your character's personality. But once you have a good handle on it, don't be afraid to, kind of push the envelope. Like, do what your character would do. There was at a point in the story where Onuris and Citra got mad at each other, and Rachel and I are practically yelling at each other in character on mic. And then the comments on that episode were like, "Oh my God, are you guys okay?" And it's like, "Yeah, we stopped playing and then went and had lunch." I mean, it's one of those things that, again, it's nice to have a group of players with you that are your good friends. We knew each other and were friends for a long time before we started the podcast. So it's okay that Onuris and Citra got mad at each other. It's okay that they exchanged some harsh words. It was a really good role-playing moment. But once you step away from the table, that's a non-issue. Rachel and I weren't ever really upset with each other about the events that happened in that episode. In fact, I think we were making jokes about it at lunch later on. So, I mean, it's one of those, don't be afraid to have your character say something you feel like your character would say. You just know those boundaries, that it's one of those, what happens in game is not a reflection of your relationship with that character's player.
Yeah.
So, that's how you get your really good role-playing moments, is going ahead and just trying to push that envelope a little bit. And then these are also, we've touched on this a little bit, everybody else has, about incorporating these skills from your podcasting game back into your off-air games. Some of the descriptions and the role-playing and things like that we've gotten really good at while doing Mummy's Mask and Tyrant's Grasp, we've incorporated those back into our non-recorded games, and I feel like it's good practice to do it both ways, and I feel like it's improved our games that aren't necessarily a part of the podcast as well. So, So I think that's about all I've got to say for player tips. Do we want to open the floor for some questions, or does anybody else have any comments?
We'll open the floor for some Q&A. I did want to make a comment real quick. We are a group of cat lovers.
Yes.
So you may have noticed a disproportionate number of cats on this feed.
Yeah, Mikey was very chatty a minute ago. I'm sorry about that, guys.
So we hope that you also love cats. That, and I also want to bring up, just remind all of you that we are we are doing this to help game creators, and that if you are able to, if you could please donate at the rcrfcharity.org or their Drive-Thru RPG page. You can find a link just up above us. So after that, I suppose we'll open it up to some questions, some comments from chat.
Oh, and I just want to add, while we wait on people to ask some questions, that you can also be interested in the other PC characters at the table.
Yeah.
Heather and I have done that on several occasions.
Where you're just like, hey, I didn't mean romantically. I meant you might romantically be interested in them.
Why not both?
But sometimes I just want to know about Sudi's backstory, so I'm gonna ask some questions or provide some opportunities, and that's helpful for everyone, including your game master.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I know that we've had long role-playing sessions, and that'll give Rick or Ross sometimes time to, hey, I'm gonna look up what's in this next room, or refresh, because usually they're so prepared that they know what's in there. But it's kind of nice to just refresh it and whatnot. And so like if we keep the role play going, 1, it's fun, and 2, it helps them.
Yep.
Yeah. As a game master, you can never. It's always a blessing when 2 players are like, I'm going to start carrying on a conversation, and you're like, great. What does the distraction ability of swarms do?
Awful things that don't need to be known.
Bad times.
Swarms.
Oh, man.
Alright.
Cursed
And,
nausea.
Nausea, you say?
Oh no. To
we do
shreds,
have
you
our
say.
first question from Revcon. I'm probably pronouncing that horribly. I'm so sorry.
No, that's right.
No,
That's TJ.
correct.
I know it's TJ, but
Gracious.
anyway.
Friend of the
he
pod,
said-
PJ. Question
Yeah, friend
is,
of the pod. What advice would you give for picking your niche other than what's already out there? By your interest, your hobbies, or something else?
actually, I do want to mention something because I looked this up while Jessica was doing her part. Of the assorted actual play podcasts out there, if you're interested in starting one, there isn't one for Hell's Rebels.
There's
I'm just
also
saying.
not one for Wrath of the Righteous or Return of the Rune Lords. Which that
Yeah.
makes sense. That'd be kind of hard.
It's kind of a sequel, but
Yeah.
and Wrath of the
Yeah.
Righteous uses the mythic rules. Although if someone really delivered on portraying the mythic rules, that could make for a very interesting actual play as well.
True.
Epic.
As far as like picking your niche is concerned, I feel like a lot of that is deciding what your group is good at.
Mhm.
So I was blessed to have a table full of excellent role players, people
Aw,
that know
thank
the
you.
rules very well. I'm complimenting you guys right now.
My
So.
heart.
Yay!
It's a
It's got
compliment
something in it
sandwich,
now.
but the center of it is also a compliment.
Oh, that's the best kind. That is the best kind.
It's the meat with a side of meat meal.
Yep. And so we decided early on, and funny enough, I wanted to do something that has a very distinctive flair and flavor to it. And I have always loved Egypt. And so being able to do something in an Egyptian analog worked really well for me. Whereas if you have a group and you really like to cut loose and joke around and, have funny, silly moments and all the rest of that, Hell's Vengeance might not be for you.
Yeah.
Pirate's
Maybe not.
Grasp, maybe not for you.
Mhm.
Maybe you can try to do some sort of dark gallows humor with it if you feel like not to stereotype or anything, but if you like that dry British wit, you could probably do something fun like that. But knowing the theme that you're going for, so if you want to do horror, embrace doing a horror game. If you want to do something more like light-hearted and a little bit slapsticky or anything like that, maybe look at I don't know, Skull and Shackle. If you want to do pirates with a side of Pirates of the Caribbean.
Or like Extinction Curse. Is that the circus one?
Oh, yeah.
I want to play
Yeah.
that one so bad.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like that's a lot of just kind of finding your niche and sticking to it.
All right. Well, our next question is, how much wiggle room do you leave in your backstory so Rick can blend it with the story? Like with Sudi revealing stuff every 50 episode, how much of that do you already know?
I'm glad you mentioned Sudi. So my backstory for Sudi was he's a catfolk. And I told Rick I wanted to go into Living Monolith, so he kind of knew that angle. But I said, he was abandoned and picked up by this priest of Caden, and that was pretty much it. Like that was all I told Rick.
And he ran drugs.
And yeah, and then the whole backstory with the Fated and all of that, I wrote that in. But so in episode 50, whenever Sudi finds out like his true name and becomes a living monolith, that was totally new to me. Like that was so fresh that I was excited because I was like, one, I get to be a living monolith finally. But two, this is stuff I didn't even know. And I find that I do that a lot more now, where I leave like gaps in my backstory that can be filled in with kind of whatever fits the story. So a lot was not put in.
Yeah, I think that to piggyback on that, it depends on the character. Some characters have, like, Hollis is 165 years old. I'm not going to write a tome of backstory.
Write a novel.
I think I gave Rick a bulleted list of major events, and then we can kind of fill in. But with shorter lived races, sometimes there are things that I know I want to have happened for sure. But I also will just text Rick and be like, hey, I need a mentor, or hey, I want to be from like a noble family. What noble family could I be tied into? I haven't done that in a game that we've recorded, but a lot of the times Rick's also really good at looking at your backstory and finding really creative ways to take what you thought you had already figured out and decided.
Yeah.
And like twist it just enough to be surprising,
Yeah.
like with Sagira's parents and stuff. So I would say, you know, anything that you want to make sure 100% that has happened in your backstory, put it in there. But, you know, be open to having some flexibility, because that gives your GM a lot of room to be able to kind of weave things together like a little spider in a web.
Yeah.
Yeah, I frequently ask Rick, well, like even for on yours, I was like, hey, I need a mentor. And that's where Tedasura came in and his backstory and things like that. So it's really one of those, don't be afraid to ask your DM questions. It's one of those, hey, yeah, I need a mentor, or why would, a priest of Horus be doing this thing? Or, for example, so it gives you some ideas that you can work with. And then a lot of times once Rick is giving you that kind of feedback, he's already got a plan about how he's going to use it later on anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in general, I think get in the things that you definitely want in for your character, that this is the thing that I want to have happened with my character. And then paint in broad strokes where you say something along the lines of, my character fought in the world wound. The end.
Yep.
Yep.
And then I came back. And it's like, oh, okay, well, if I need to later on just go, hey, here's this guy, he shows up. By the way, Jordan, you used to fight with this guy in the world wound.
What?
And Jordan can be like, oh, okay, I
Hi.
remember you. Yeah. Didn't we fight a Glabrezu? Wasn't that thing like a challenge rating 14? I'm pretty sure it killed us.
Yeah. Well, that kind of gets into...
Literally, I'm pretty sure it killed you. No.
That kind of gets into...
I came back.
Improv and yes and, which is something I think we've gotten a lot better at. But
Yeah.
if someone presents something to you, like, hey, don't I know you? It's a lot better for the story generally to say, yeah, I think I do know you, and then to kind of riff together to create like whatever it is that was presenting. And that's kind of a way to make the world feel real, especially with NPCs and events in the past and stuff.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I will say, just as a general statement, also leave that a little bit more on the GM side. So as a player, it's kind of awkward if you walk up to an NPC and go, didn't I used to work with you?
Yeah.
It's like,
True.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm evil.
All right.
I'm actually the bad guy.
Okay, so we have kind of a not exactly question, but sort of question. I'm gonna probably butcher this. Crag Kagar wants to learn about the cats' names and about the cool-looking sword, if they are things we are willing to discuss.
Oh, that's the Master Sword from Legend of Zelda that's hanging behind me.
It's not in frame, but don't you have the shield?
Is, the Hyrule Shield's next to it, but it's not on the
Slightly out of frame.
screen. Yeah.
We already met your cat.
Yeah, Mikey. He's asleep behind me. I think you can still see the little black ball.
Yes,
but yes.
yes.
I believe Ross also has 2.
I do. Yes, I have Amelia, who desperately wants to get in here. I may let her in toward the end and see how this goes. She keeps like meowing at the door. I feel so. And then I also have Cleo, who is asleep.
There you are. And then Jess and Jordan have 2.
Yeah, if we have Mr. Winston, who is not in here. He's a great tabby.
He's asleep on his throne, also known as our bed.
Gigantic.
Yeah, he's a very big cat.
He's a big cat.
And we have Adora, who I think was on the 3D printer in the back earlier, kind of wandering around.
Yeah.
Little calico tabby kitty.
She is so tiny.
And she's tiny.
She
We
is
have
bitty.
opposite size kitties. Very tiny and very big.
So and we have
Rachel,
4.
Yeah, we have 4.
So we have Ezio, who is my big orange tabby. Then we have Dexter, who is our other orange. Yeah, he is our literally pear-shaped orange tabby.
He's off screen, but he sleeps up on my my bookshelf here.
Yeah, usually he sleeps on the bed behind me. Like sometimes when we're doing this, you can see him there, but he's off wandering somewhere. And then we have Mr. Kenway, who is our scaredy cat.
His
He's
tail
actually
was
the
in
one
frame a little bit earlier, so if you go back to I think it was about the first 10
The
minutes or
little
so, you might have seen a tail walk by.
And then I think if you listen to any of our podcasts, you probably heard us mention Sophie. She is the devil. She is our little tuxedo cat.
In fact, the devil.
She's a very high-strung cat, and she only loves Rick. She tolerates everyone else sometimes.
Sometimes she doesn't even tolerate us.
Yeah, sometimes she doesn't even tolerate.
That is a hateful cat.
Yesterday, I had to kick her out of my room. So she was being evil.
So there you go.
Yep, those are all of our
Okay.
pets there. What else do we
Next
have?
question is, how do you pick who will play which category, like healer, tank, etc.?
A lot
I'll
of
leave
that
that
is
to all of you.
really a lot of that's really based off of like what we played in the last game. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, I was a paladin when we did Curse of the Crimson Throne. So for this game, I want to be something else, and then it all just kind of falls together that way.
It's a little bit of like dibs. It's like whoever thinks of their character concepts first. Like, I'm going to play a druid because I thought of that. I just want to let you know. We'll text each other. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
okay. Then I guess I'm not going to do that. And then it kind of,
I'm always last.
everyone kind of fills in.
We go through cycles of like character ideas and things, especially for the
Yeah.
podcast of like what would make a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Like, okay, we're definitely going to need a healer for Tyrant's Grasp when we were starting it, and I hadn't played a healer in a while, so I was like, okay, I'll play a healer. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of happens naturally, just and if you end up like me, who's the last one, that's why I usually am pushed to play a bunch of characters that I wouldn't normally play, because I'm like, oh well, they already picked all those. All right, what's in the book?
Sometimes those are the
It's
best
fair.
characters, though.
Rachel is always the last one to check those
No.
text messages. It's
It's
straight.
really bad.
Unfortunate for her, really, I suppose.
One of these days, we're just gonna let her pick first, and none of us
Yeah.
can pick anything until
I
she
picked
does.
first once, and that was the only time that I was like, nope, this is the character I'm going to play. Screw all y'all.
Oh,
So,
man.
okay, we have some more questions.
Oh, I was just going to say on that, it does raise the importance of having a diverse again, if you're looking at actual play, having a diverse group of characters, being able to cover a variety of different positions. Because if you're looking at it's again kind of falls in that sticking to your lane, knowing what you're supposed to be doing to contribute to the group. So having that discussion is important.
That's true.
Yes.
Well, and if you think it
Yeah.
like, we also have some specific personality types. Like Heather likes to do damage. Like
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from a gameplay
Rachel
style.
likes to do damage. Ross and I really like support. Jordan likes to do spellcasting generally.
Yeah.
Usually arcane. So we all kind of have niches we like.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, obviously we're outside of them sometimes. It is what it is. But
Yeah.
these are just kind of personality quirks.
All right, FDLL or FD2, the second. I don't know.
Fiddle.
depends on the font.
Fiddle.
I don't know. Fiddle.
Fiddle.
Have you created your Fated Tales characters yet, and are there any details you can divulge with which to tease us?
I have a spoiler. I'm playing Sagira.
So some of
Is
you may
Israel
have
still
heard
there?
some of you may have heard the announcement for the Fated Tales, which is going to be our side story that we're running while our Mummy's Mask main story is on hold, as
Because
we
of
are no
this-
longer able to get together to record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's some
person.
pandemic thing going on or something.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unfortunately the whole reason that we are doing this to raise money and awareness for
Yes.
people
Yeah.
that are currently not able to produce the content that they normally are, and we kind of fall much into that same category. But fortunately, we can do a vast majority of that remotely, just not necessarily at the same audio quality that we're used to doing when we are in person.
Yeah.
If you can't tell from this, we're still kind of getting used to doing this
Yeah.
whole remote thing.
Mhm.
We're
and
gonna
so
try
balancing
our
levels and all the rest of
best.
that. Yeah. And so we will be doing something separately. I think as far as I would hold back on any details, but let's just say that. Do you want to give a little bit of a spoiler, a little bit of a surprise, a sneak peek for people?
I love
here?
a sneak
That's up to,
peek.
that's up to you.
Okay. So
Him.
how about this? For our sneak peek, you are going to be getting an additional player in the Fated Tales.
Dun dun
I wonder
dun.
who that
That's
is.
right. This guy, I don't know where he is. in
He's above
relation-
you.
He's right
He's right above
you.
you.
This guy right here is going
Hi.
to be featured for the first time
It's me.
on our. Well,
I'm the
actually, no,
secret.
Ross did go up for one of our after parties once
true.
before. But this will be the first time that he's featured as a player on our
Yep.
Mummy's Mask
I'm
main channel.
secret.
Hey, what if we gave them just the classes everyone's playing with no other
You know what?
details?
Sure, why not?
That sounds like fun.
Oh gosh.
So, Jessica?
I'm playing a ranger brawler
With a kitty.
with a kitty named Isra.
Shocking.
Gracious. So for this one, I am playing a vivisectionist alchemist.
All right, I am playing an urban druid.
I am playing a slayer.
I am drawing a blank.
Aren't you a medium?
I'm
believe
pretty
you're
sure
a
I was the
medium.
medium, but I was like, I had spiritualist stuck in my head, and I was like, no,
No,
that's
you're
not
not a
right.
Oh
no,
my
I am
goodness.
playing a medium. Yeah, I am playing a medium.
Oh,
Who am
Rachel.
I?
Yeah, this is why I picked my characters last.
Oh my god.
Oh man.
Okay.
So yes, that will be our that'll be the side story that we are engaging in as we continue on up until this the quarantine lifts and we are able to get back to our main story once again. It's a story that we were already planning on telling.
Yes.
It just seemed like an opportune time to do so.
Yes.
Mhm.
All right. For our next question, we have what do you think about the less used classes, at least in podcasts, like vigilantes, summoners, investigators, ninjas, and those more
Medium.
niche classes?
They're bringing mediums up.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, am a lover of the odder classes. Like investigators are like my favorite.
Yeah, see,
That's
summoners are my favorite classes, but some of those the summon makes that class run longer than it returns, run longer than a lot of other people. So sometimes I don't know how well a summoner would actually work for a podcast, unfortunately, because they're awesome.
Yeah.
But-
You do. Oh, go.
Yeah, I think that we end up, I mean, at least when I make a new character, I try to make something that I haven't made before, and so I kind of end up doing all sorts. I like archetypes a lot. I do a lot of archetypes. But I think, some up and coming stuff might see some interesting new classes. Obviously, we have a medium, so
And I don't know if any of us have ever played a Cavalier before, because Val's definitely the first one I've played. So.
First one that we've played
Yeah.
Yeah.
with you in. And
So-
the thing with like the ninja and the samurai is it's very kind of regional specific for it to make a lot of sense. So, if we were playing something that was in TN, I'd probably have to play that just because it won't make sense.
Yeah.
Because what's a ninja doing in Osirian? That's kind of a hard story to tell.
that's
so,
how Kitsune
Again-
are for me. Yeah, because I think
Kind of
they're
going
very
with that
cute,
play to your
but-
region.
Yeah.
Kitsune and Osirian doesn't really make sense.
Yep.
Yeah, the ninja and well, actually specifically the ninja and the samurai are classes that are in essence rogues and cavaliers respectively.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just the archetype, they couldn't make them into an archetype because it changed too much of the class, but they're still very close to their base class.
Mm-hmm.
I also think vigilantes are really cool. I played a magical girl vigilante once, but they only really make sense if you're going to stay in one area for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that just is probably going to depend on what it is you're playing.
Yeah, like a city
Yeah.
campaign is really good for those.
Like,
I have a challenge for someone
Council
now.
of Thieves or like Curse of the Crimson Throne would be good for vigilantes, I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
If I
What is your
recall
challenge?
correctly, there's an archetype of the vigilante that gives you divine casting, and there's an archetype of the vigilante that gives you arcane casting.
Mhm.
Yes.
So if someone does take up the actual play mantle of doing Hell's Rebels and does an all vigilante party,
Oh, that would be
very
that'd be a
impressed by
challenge.
that.
That'd be rad.
So let us know if you decide to take that burden
Yeah.
upon yourself.
Wow.
All right.
I
So
think we have time for one more question.
TJ's got another question then. If you had to play in one of the new non-Galarian nations for 2E, what would it be?
The new non-Golarion nations.
Oh, that are
I think maybe
Not in
Non-inner
1E?
sea, probably.
I think non-inner sea.
ah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because Galarian's the whole world.
I mean-
Like he says, like Arcadia, etc.
I was gonna say just from just from talking with Luis.
Oh, you're gonna steal mine.
Luis
Yeah, you're
Loza,
stealing mine
who,
too.
yeah, I'm gonna steal yours, Jessica. Just from talking with Luis Loza at PaizoCon, who is part of the Paizo staff. He's also part of the New Direction Network. I have so much interest in Arcadia. Just his passion for it is infectious. Maybe not the best term right now. Just
Yeah.
I want to play in Arcadia so much. It just
Luchador?
yeah.
Come on. I'm
Yeah.
in.
Oh, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
like
That's pretty awesome.
I kind of want to play like an abuelita with like a chancla and I like hit people with my shoe. Like it sounds so fun. Like and in 2E age doesn't matter.
It's true. It's true.
So I could be a little old lady who just like takes off my shoe and hits the bad guys and that would be amazing.
I got my +2 keen shoe here.
I just play a fighter.
I'm
Like,
like stunning or something.
Nah.
I do have a second one if I can.
yeah, sure.
I would also on the subject of
apparently everyone's
non-Golarion.
allowed to do except for me.
Well, because we
I get
all had
special.
Arcadia. We can't all have Arcadia.
We all had Arcadia. On the idea of non-Golarion is I would love to do something that actually takes place on Castrovel, but in Pathfinder.
Oh yeah,
So,
that would
like,
be
using
cool.
Silver and Stone and playing something with the elves in Castrovel.
That would be
That
cool.
would be really fun.
That would be pretty cool.
Or Triaxis, like something that's set entirely in Triaxis during either the winter or summer. That would be cool, but in Pathfinder, not in Starfinder.
Yeah.
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 Personally, I'm actually a big fan of Tianjia,
Mm.
especially
Yeah, I second
one of
that.
one of the campaigns I've always wanted to run was was the Jade Regent one, which takes you to Minkai, but there's a lot of other places in that region that have been completely unexplored, and I think that'd be
Yeah.
yeah.
We played I think it was Heather, Jordan, Rick and I played some Pathfinder Society that was all set in that region. And all I remember about it was that we all played Kitsune because it was like the only time.
Yeah, we're like, oh, this is the time, finally.
And I was a
Kitsune
rice
trophy.
cleric and it was super fun.
Oh man.
I was a samurai.
I think my favorite part of that was I think it was part of the quest series from the Pathfinder Society line, and there's a quest where you have a martial arts, like you have to go to a martial arts dojo and then
Yeah.
beat up their champion by
Like it's a Pokemon
provoking him
gym.
to a fight in a tea house. It is amazing.
It was
That
so
sounds
good.
great.
You send them bad tea and like
Oh yeah, no, we were sending some shade.
This isn't tea.
Yeah.
This is burn leaf juice.
Oh man.
also Hermia because that place sounds really bad and weird. Not bad,
Yeah.
but
What is it,
Great.
Saracen with the giant dinosaur people that they
Oh,
barely
yeah.
touched on? That would be fun.
The one that on the
Yeah,
map
that
is
would be
literally has a
good.
question mark.
and there's
like,
also
eh?
owl
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
somewhere. Where are these owl people?
I think they're in Garoon somewhere.
No, they're on like the left side of the map.
Oh, are they?
Mm.
Oh,
I don't know. Anyway,
Maybe.
Maybe Arcadia. Who knows?
maybe Arcadia.
I don't know. I still want to do anything with Aslan or Asland. I don't know how they pronounce it correctly, but
However
the
you want.
Aslanti area.
Or Vudra.
Yeah.
I'd also be down for
Oh,
doing a
Vudra.
Vudra adventure
Oh,
path.
Vudra.
Vudra sounds
Yes.
super
So
cool.
what I'm
Vudra.
hearing is basically anywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
Anywhere, everywhere.
all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. We're not
There are
picky.
unfortunately not enough hours in the day for us to play all the Pathfinder adventure paths in the various parts of the world that we want to play, but maybe someday.
Yeah.
I
Once we
know.
all learn how to not sleep.
Ooh, there's spider people.
No, that sounds horrifying. I'm
Wait,
over.
no.
Oh,
We're not going into
poor
Drider
Heather,
territory.
She's
no.
out on that.
So there's
Yeah.
spider
No, actually,
people. They're not
I think-
driders though.
No, they're like spider people that I
Like-
want to say there's one of them featured in some of the artwork for the Magambian school in the Lost Omens World Guide.
Magambia
So check
also.
that out.
Do we really need spider people? Is that
Yes.
a thing that we really need?
I'm a hard pass. Nah. I don't like spiders.
That's because y'all are weird. I mean, spiders, maybe spider people are bad, but spiders are cute.
Some spiders are cute.
Spiders are not cute.
They can
They are
turn.
so cute.
They can turn into giant spiders. They're in Age of Ashes apparently.
Oh,
Yep.
They can.
Oh.
Okay,
I'll look
giant
into it.
spiders is
No,
terrifying.
please don't.
Mandibles.
Don't look into it. You know?
So yeah, I
Oh,
think we're
man.
gonna have to kick things over though, because I'm pretty sure that there's more entertainment coming y'all's way. But
Oh yeah.
before we go, just a reminder, again, we are doing this for IsolaCon. Again, volunteer run charity event, RPG Creators Relief Fund, the RCRF. Again, there are a lot of people that produce amazing content that are unfortunately not able to do so at this time. And if you are able to do so, well, donate some money. You can find the link up at the top. Again, 100% of all the money goes directly to the RCRF to help support our freelancers, cartographers, artists, editors, developers, all of those amazing people who deliver all this amazing content for all of us to enjoy while we're forced to stay at home and play on Roll20 with everyone.
That's true.
Yeah.
It is
So,
true.
Again, any amount will help keep game creators and ultimately our gaming community fresh, vibrant, diverse. And again, thank all of you for tuning in, listening to us ramble on about
Thank
cats
you.
and spider people. And
Like
hopefully
you
we've
do.
inspired some of you to take up the mantle for actual play yourselves.
Yeah.
And again, if you are interested in seeing more of our stuff, you can find us at find-path.com as well as on any of your favorite podcast device by looking up Find the Path podcast. So until next time, good luck, Pathfinders.
Bye.
Bye everybody.
Bye.